If you want to integrate this intentionally and successfully, this is a change management project. This is not just a technology adoption project. And it was really the same with the internet. I
Hmm.
mean, the technology itself is not the thing that is going to differentiate you or set you aside. It's the implementation of it. It's the understanding of it. And I think that initial like awareness and education right up front so that people can start getting an idea of how you can use it and what some of the different use cases are and what the dangers are, what the opportunities are, what things you have to be aware of. Once you can get those conversations going and get people working and collaborating in groups, that's where you really start unlocking the power of these tools.
Hey, everybody, it's Roger with Kinsta. I'm joined today by a new but possibly BFF, Brian Piper. Hey, Brian, how are you?
Fantastic, Roger. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, it's great to talk to you too. We ran into each other at Digital Collegium a couple of months ago and we hit it off right away because, first of all, you're just a really cool guy. You're easy to talk to, and you're really into AI. And I don't know if you know this or not, but people are really, like, talking a lot about AI right now.
Really?
So yeah, it's this thing. So, but before we, like, dive into all of that, what I always like to do is start off by kinda getting to know you a little bit better and how you, like, got to what's happening today in your life. So, as far as, like, the internet goes, can you remember, like, the first time you logged on or, like, it really clicked for you as, like, "Wow, this is something."
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're talking like 1996. So I went to college for creative writing and philosophy. So ready to like wait tables forever, right? And luckily, my dad owned a business that did computer based training. He started that back in 1983, so I did some work for him over the summers. So finally, when I graduated, I started working for him doing some website development. I wasn't very talented. I didn't really have any education doing that, so I was learning on the job. He had some really talented guys working for him, and they kinda just kept putting me over on the content side, make the content better on this website, figure out how to get us on these search engines.
Okay.
And, that led me into, he laid me off after a couple years. I went and got a job at an ad agency for a while, running their web and new media. Then I went and got a job at a defense contracting company doing online learning for them. Not really super happy or thrilled with what I was doing. And then in 2015, I read Joe Pulizzi's Epic Content Marketing and was like, oh my gosh, you can sell things to people just by helping them and giving knowledge that's useful to them and answering questions and solving problems. So went right down to the head of our marketing department. I said, you need to hire me to do digital marketing. They brought me in. I started doing SEO basically and doubled our organic traffic in the first 6 months. Worked at that job for a while, learned a lot, and then started my job in 2017 at the University of Rochester, director of content strategy and assessment there. Dove into that, started speaking at a lot of events, content events and higher ed events, and then, started doing a little consulting on the side. And then about 2 years ago, AI came along, 3 years ago now, but 2 years ago, I helped start the Marcom AI committee at the university, really started integrating AI into the marketing department, launched the AI for You podcast, got onto the AI council, started helping other institutions. And then about 6 months ago, I left the university to do full-time consulting in AI integration and content marketing. And it's been a fantastic whirlwind of an opportunity.
Sweet. Wow, that was a whirlwind of an intro. I thank you for your brevity. So 30 years just in an instant right there. And I can relate almost completely to what you've gone through. Humanities major, so straight into sales. But the inflection point with the internet, 1995, I still remember freshman dorms, going into the computer lab, logging on. Somebody showed me Gopher FTP, right? And I was like, wow, this is incredibly boring. And then somebody showed me, I think it was the Mosaic browser still back then. And I was like, well, now this is interesting, right? Like now we're talking hyperlinks. Like I don't need to like deal with code and stuff. The parallels are really amazing. I think between today and then, right? When back then the web was still incredibly nascent, really just on universities. And then today with AI, it's exploded, right? The fastest growing product of all time, ChatGPT, like people, billions of people using it at this point. but what are we using it for? How are we using it effectively? And it's really interesting. I still have the same conversations I feel with people about the web. It feels like people skipped over owning their own place on the web. And with the AI, feel like people are skipping over owning how they use AI. How do you approach organizations and individuals when they're like, "Hey, how do I start using AI practically?"
Yeah, and so many institutions that I go in and start working with, that's their first question. What tools should we use?
Mm,
What use cases do we have? I'm like, really, if you want to integrate this intentionally and successfully, this is a change management project. This is not just a technology adoption project. And it was really the same with the internet. I mean, the technology itself is not the thing that is going to differentiate you or set you aside. It's the implementation of it. It's the understanding of it. And I think that initial like awareness and education right up front so that people can start getting an idea of how you can use it and what some of the different use cases are and what the dangers are, what the opportunities are, what things you have to be aware of. Once you can get those conversations going and get people working and collaborating in groups, that's where you really start unlocking the power of these tools because, you know, efficiency is like a 10% gain, like 10 to 20%, you save some time, but it's the innovation where you're changing the way you do your work, not just like the individual processes. That's where you can like 10x and really make some dramatic improvements in how you reach your goals. And it's
okay.
really, I think, all about figuring out how you can collaborate with these tools to help, scale and augment your own expertise and your own knowledge.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Totally in agreement, and I think that's one of the big unlocks for me is every time I talk with a person about I learn so much more, right? Because 'Cause they're like, "Oh, this is how I'm doing it," and I'm like, "Well, this is how I'm doing it," and we kinda had this nice back and forth, and I feel like so many of us are just stuck by ourselves trying to learn how to use these tools. Backing up a quick second though, man, I'm gonna be all over the place. So, one of the parallels I see with this is like when we went onto the web, we kind of left publishing or traditional publishing behind. Like it was like, okay, we don't need to have a big printer. We don't need to have it on a newspaper that has to be distributed. Now you can just put it on a website and you're ready to go. With AI, where are you seeing, like, that acceleration? Like, is there a specific example you have where an organization has incorporated AI in, and it's really just unlocked a lot of stuff for them?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many opportunities. Like I think I always use Moderna as a great case study
Okay,
because they gave everybody access to the tools. They gave them training, they gave them education, they started teaching people how to create custom GPTs. And I think something like within the first 6 months, they ended up with like 700 different custom GPTs that their employees had all built, that they were
okay,
all sharing and using together, that were really helping them solve problems and transform the way they worked. And I think, really creating any sort of collaborative team type of environment where you can get those interactions is incredible. But, on the higher ed side, I mean, there are so many different ways to integrate these into admissions and marketing to have like really quick, dramatic improvements in your processes and your workflows and in the way that you spend your time. One of the things that always keeps coming back is the more time you can save with AI doing the monotonous, repetitive tasks, the more time you have to do the strategic, human, connecting kind of tasks.
okay, okay. Kinda talking a little bit more practicality again, when you're trying to bring this into the organization and you're trying to come up with some sort of policy, right? A lot of the times I feel like the policy is don't do this, don't do that. And that's not very helpful, right? Because now I'm like afraid I'm going to screw up. What are some ways that you try to help organizations kind of understand the potential and how to talk with their employees to encourage the use of these tools?
Yeah, and that's where I really recommend guidelines over policies, partially because you can change guidelines much faster and easier. AI is developing and evolving so quickly. If you created a policy, you'd have to be constantly going back to revisit that. So the guidelines, not only do they provide guardrails of how you should and should not use the tools, what data you should or shouldn't put into these tools, but it gives people the awareness that this is something that they can do. This is something they can experiment with, explore with. Tell people it's okay to fail. You're going to fail while you learn how to use these tools, but then you're going to find things along the way that are going to work really well. And I really think that that transparency, that openness, that ability to bring people together to start having these conversations and these meetups, this is really where you're going to start unlocking the possibilities. I mean, there's million different use cases that you could use, but really until you start getting those conversations going, you're gonna keep missing out on opportunities.
Okay, yeah, no, I dig that completely. So there's a lot of hype around AI, right? I mean, on one hand, Sam Altman's telling us that in 2 days my job's going to be replaced, and that's been going on for at least 2 years now. So I'm waiting for that to happen. A little anxiety. On the other hand, there appears to be quite a bubble happening. JP Morgan, I feel like this morning just kind of talked about how expectations and reality of revenue seem to be very out of whack. For people that are looking at this bubble environment and are kind of maybe they're starting to say, "Oh, it's a fad, it's going to be over with." How are you starting to approach when you're talking with clients, friends, and family, how to look at what is maybe gonna happen if there is kind of a crash? How do we prepare ourselves for that so that, the tools we're using are still around, they're still useful for us? What's your landscape looking like here?
Yeah, I mean, any big technological innovation has had an associated bubble with it, right? We had it with the dot-com bubble, and there were lots of companies that went out of business, that went under, definitely had an impact on the market. But it didn't make the internet go away. It didn't make websites go away. Find really good use cases that work really well for you, that help you be more efficient and effective in your work. Make sure that you take any of those prompts or instructions or tools that you have out of these foundation models and keep a backup of them somewhere in your owned property so that, if an entire model gets retired or acquired by somebody else, you still have all of your information, all of your data, all of the tools that you need. I think we're going to see more and more organizations looking at developing their own models and finding platforms that they can customize specifically for their needs and make sure that the security and the data and the model training is exactly what they want. Yeah, I think there is going to be, a crash of some sort because the valuation does not equal the revenue. So there's a huge disparity there. And at some point, these companies are going to be required to, figure out how to make some revenue to equal those valuations. But until then, they're just throwing a bunch of money at this, building massive data centers, and they're all racing towards, AGI and super intelligence. Whereas I'm racing towards really good practical implementation of the products that we already have right now.
Absolutely. I think that that's sage advice, and, the more I think back to the dot-com boom and the crash, I was at a hosting company in 2003, and at that point, they were already talking about commodification. There's no point in starting up more hosting companies, and, I'm working at Kinsta that started in 2013, which would be considered an incredibly late entry into the marketplace, but, we're doing pretty well. These local LMs is something I've started playing with. I'm using Studio LM and trying to find models that I can run on my laptop is kind of the challenge there. But the problem I see there is kind of a balkanization, right? Where now I'm using a tool that's only on my laptop. Where's the middle ground? What services are you seeing already that organizations can start plugging into and they own this stuff without having to start from scratch and like hire a whole team to build it?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of ways to kind of create your own lockdown environment. So obviously using the APIs and creating a safe environment for your employees to be able to upload student records and different types of, private data into there. I think that's a great kind of place to start. And then you get your development team to start understanding how the different models work. But then I eventually see more and more organizations, especially highly regulated domains like healthcare or finances, really figuring out how to use some of these open source models, Llama, Gamma. I mean, there's some great options out there. And it's the next wave of developers. And now with the ability to, vibe code and to AI code your stack, you can get your current developers up to speed fairly quickly on, different ways to integrate these tools into your custom landscapes.
I love it, and you're bringing up something there that is always like I have to remind myself with is the meta-ness of these tools, right? Where it's like, we used to always say, "Did you Google that?" And now it's like, "Okay, did you run it through the LM?" What is your suggestion for people who, if they ever get into this cycle where maybe they forget, like, "Hey, we'll just throw it in the GPT and kind of see where it can maybe unstick you." What are some methodologies you have for helping people think outside the box, as it were, about just the applications of these tools?
Yeah, so I love talking with these tools. So,
Okay.
either the advanced voice mode in ChatGPT or using like Whisperflow or some solution like that, where you can just have a conversation with these tools. And a lot of times I will say, interview me about this topic and ask me all sorts of questions about the topic. So then it gets all of my knowledge and information into the tool. And then I say, now I want you to play devil's advocate, or now I want you to give me differentiating viewpoints, or I want you to look at things from a different lens and debate me about this topic. So now I'm getting out of my own knowledge base, out of my own head, and having a conversation with this really smart AI that, has all sorts of knowledge at its fingertips. And it really helps break me out of kind of my own way of thinking. It all starts with my expertise and my knowledge as the basis for the conversation. So that's been a huge unlock for me recently.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I'm trying to have these conversations. Sometimes they get a little bit off track, but that's also my fault, right? To try and bring them back on. I think another thing that I've started realizing is just the value of like human to human conversations, right? In many ways, we're so much more intelligent than these machines are, and so the nuance of talking to humans. It feels like the AI is helping me to remind me of that. Same thing with my writing. I'm writing way more now than I did before I started using these tools, which is fascinating. Tying things together here. Obviously, at Kinsta, we're very focused on publishing with WordPress, creating websites, owning your domain on the web. What are some ways that you help people think about using the web in a post AI world where search has gotten very fluid now? How are you helping people to kind of navigate this landscape now?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of organizations are starting to panic a little bit as they see their organic traffic dropping, their overall website traffic dropping. There's all these like zero click search results that are coming up out there. But if you just take your existing content and figure out, instead of doing, SEO where it's keyword focused, start thinking about how you can make your website and your content very conversationally focused. So, what questions are people asking that you can answer? What problems do they have that you can solve, right? It's the heart of content marketing. And then figure out how you can make sure that the content on your website is easy to read and, very helpful for them, as well as being easy for these bots and spiders to come in and scrape and index. So, structured data, schema markup, all these different things that you can do within your website to make sure that it is understanding the content that you're putting on there and it knows how to index and how to categorize that content. I think that's, and just thinking about distribution of your content, because we can't just focus on our websites anymore because people are searching, especially prospective students, Gen Z, Gen Alpha. They're searching on social, they're searching in communities, they're searching in voice. And we're seeing some changes in the form factor, the delivery factor, more people talking to these tools. We're seeing the integration in robotics. How long is it going to be before your robot dog and you are having a conversation and you're asking it to research things for you? I think we need to make sure that, kind of that headless CMS concept where your content is separate from the delivery platform. These are all things we need to start thinking about as we're planning ahead for the day where it's not just B2B to B or B2C anymore. Now it's going to be B2A, where businesses are talking to people's personal AI agents, or your business agent is talking to people's personal AI agents. And then we're feeding in the strategy and the expertise. And then on the end user side, they're making the final decision based on these conversations that these agents are having about our content.
Wow. Okay. All right. mind blown as always every time I talked with you. Brian, I like to keep these short and sweet. As a fun kind of end here, I'd love to hear what your like favorite little prompt kind of secret to share with people is. For example, mine is at the end of a prompt, I like to add, please ask me 5 questions about this prompt to help you do a better job. And then it asks me all these context related questions that, I just totally forgot. Do you have something like that that you'd like to share with people that really helps them see more potential with these tools?
Yeah. So I use the same methodology, right? I use Christopher Penn's race model. So you give the tool a role, tell it what action you're going to ask it to perform, and that helps kind of prime the model. So it narrows down its focus, and then you give it all that context, all the data, all the information. You ask the tool what you're missing, tell it to ask you some questions about that, and then you tell it to execute the prompt. And really using, asking the tool to interview you and to really pull as much knowledge out of you as it can, I think is been huge for me.
Excellent. All right. So you've shared Christopher Penn's name there. Obviously, you have many books, which we see behind you. People need to check those out. You've mentioned to me the AI Institute, the Academy, AI Academy, System RX. What is another resource that you absolutely love to share with people and that will help them kind of see the potential with these tools?
Yeah, Ethan Mollick on LinkedIn is a Wharton professor. He's an AI expert, and he puts out posts, multiple times a week that are always just mind blowing, leading research, all that sort of stuff.
Awesome. And he also had a really great book,
Co-intelligence, excellent book.
Co-intelligence. I shared that with my wife, and that totally unlocked it for her.
Yeah, it's super consumable, very easy to read. And if you want to get really freaked out, you can read Mustafa Solomon's book, The Coming Wave, which is AI, robotics, and bioengineering. And it's either super inspiring or super frightening, depending on your perspective.
Well, I'm watching Pluribus right now. I don't know if you've seen this on Apple TV.
Yeah, I started watching that. Yeah.
Okay. There's so many parallels in that. I'm still unpacking what's happening and that show is doing to me, but I feel like it's like this AI tool in a way. Brian, as always, man, it is such a pleasure to talk with you. I learn so much every time we talk. I get inspired. Thank you so much. If people want to get in touch with you, if they want to hire you, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can find me at brianwpiper.com or on any of the socials at Brian W. Piper.
Brian, great to see you. I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks so much, Roger. Great talking with you.